All right, my name is Cal Houchins. I'm a tech and a trainer for McNeil. I also run the Outside Digital Art and Design, and we like to do these. We like to do these videos probably about once, maybe every month or so. We like to do a Windows one and a Mac one, and the whole concept behind this is it's basically a simple project that we can get through in about an hour, and hopefully I can show you a few of my bag of tricks and the difference between these videos and a lot of videos that you'll see is these are completely unrehearsed, which may become very obvious here as we go. I like to build these from scratch. I do a little scratchy, awful sketch before I start just to get going, just to decide what I'm gonna build, and then I build it from scratch. I've never built it before. It's not rehearsed. We're not Julia Childing anything by opening some layers and saying, and it looks like this. So we're going to build it from scratch. If we run into a problem, we're going to fix it along the way because I want to basically simulate the same experience that you have when you sit down and do this stuff yourself. And so if a problem comes up along the build, we're going to stop, we're going to analyze what went wrong, we're going to try and figure it out, and then hopefully come up with a solution and basically allow you to see the workflow in all of its splendor and horror and all that kind of stuff. So we definitely want you to see how the sausage is made. If there's and hopefully within that there's some learning that we can gather by seeing when things go great and when things go not so great and all that kind of stuff. So with that, you guys are all like, "Whoa, this is going to be terrible." No, it's going to be fine. So I'm going to build this little flashlight thing, and I find there's a market in the United States, and I don't know if anybody who's joining us from overseas if there's the same thing over there, but we have this thing called a tactical flashlight here in the United States, which I think is just an absolutely hilarious product because only in this country could we take a flashlight and turn it into a weapon. But so I'm going to build something like that. First of all, because it's a cool little object and it looks, kind of gnarly, but it also has a bunch of little opportunities for talking about different ways of detailing. And one of the things that I want to cover towards the end is when we start adding textures and finishes and stuff like that, we're going to start talking about some of the new rendering tools in V6. So if the modeling part bores you, but you're interested in the rendering part, hang out towards the end because that's where we're going to cover that. So I start everything that I do. I start with the picture command, which is the replacement for the picture frame command. I have this scabby little sketch I did this morning, and the whole idea behind, just getting something into the window to work on. This isn't necessarily what this thing is going to end up looking like, but it's a little guide for me to talk to myself and say, well, maybe it's here, and maybe there's a texture here, and maybe there's a thing here, and maybe there's something going on here, and this is the basic shape and the basic size and all that kind of stuff. And so when I do this stuff, especially if I'm just kind of like freestyle designing stuff, I like to start with at least some very basic reference. And the picture command basically allows you to put something in the scene, and it also allows you to do things like, if this was, say, a four view, say there was a front view and a side view and a top view on the same image, I could copy and paste this image, and I could move it, and I could take it and I could place it here, and I could build a little reference grid. I could also drag this with Gumball and tap Alt, see that little plus that shows up, and make another copy of it. And I could have all sorts of different reference planes in this as I worked. In this case, I've only got one view, so I don't need these, so I'm just going to pick them and delete them. But if I were to build over this as it sits, you can see the problem right off the bat. My curves are black, my drawing is black. This starts to become difficult to see exactly what I'm doing. So I'm going to pick on the picture frame here, and I'm going to go to the Materials tab. And if you don't have the Materials tab open, right-click on any of the tabs that are already showing, and come down here to Materials and just turn this on. Okay. And then that'll bring up a Materials tab, and you'll see in here there's actually a picture frame material. You can see picture down here with the name of the file, and then we've got an object transparency down here, and I'm going to just take this and slide it up. And as I go up, the image starts to fade and becomes more transparent. And then it's just a suggestion of reference. It's not quite so overwhelming in the scene. And then the last thing I want to do is, if I were to model this, let's say for instance I built something over the center line like this, you can see right off the bat, if I were, especially if I were could go into shaded mode, you can see how the image kind of gets cut in half. That makes me crazy when I model. I can't stand that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this and just slide this straight back in the scene using gumball. So it's out of the area where I'm actually going to be modeling. But in the front view, it appears, you know, basically where I want it to be. So, so that's kind of the whole concept behind what we're doing. And so I'm going to just eyeball this thing around the origin. And it's going to be somewhere around here. This is going to be a symmetrical object, so maybe I'll use this as a guide, that little detail right there. So it looks like that's about centered. So I'm going to just let that roll right there. And then the last thing I want to do with this image is I don't want to be able to select it while I'm modeling, because that's going to be a problem. So I'm going to come to my Layers tab. Again, if you don't have a Layers tab, right-click on here and just turn it on. And I'm going to go down here and I'm going to change this to image. I'm going to right click, I'm going to change this object layer here, and then I'm going to lock this. I'm going to change my back to default as my working layer, and then I'm going to lock this. So now that this is locked, it just hangs out here. But the cool thing about putting it on a layer as opposed to just locking it using like the lock command is I can turn it on and off with the layer, which is really useful, especially if I've got a bunch of reference. So say I've got a front view and a rear view and a top view and a bottom view and all that stuff, and there's all this clutter in the scene that I don't necessarily need. I can set up a different image layer for each one of those. So this would be top, bottom, front, back, right, left, whatever. And then I can just come in here and I can turn them on and off as I need. So that's my favorite way of organizing stuff as far as reference material goes. So this thing is a fairly simple object. If we start analyzing this kind of from a form point of view, we can see right off the bat that this is kind of a revolved object, right? This is dying for being revolved, and then it looks like it's got some opportunities for some detailing that we can either do with booleans, or we can do with trims, or we can do with, you know, whatever. There's a bunch of different ways we can handle this. So the things that we have to decide right off the bat are which of these pieces are going to be connected in a single unit. And so I basically, like, this whole head is probably going to be a single unit. It's probably going to travel through here. So this whole thing is probably going to be the same. And then maybe I want, you know, a material change here or a material change here, some knurling or some opportunities for that. So we might want to set this up so that when this is revolved, if we make this out of individual curves and then join them, when it gets rotated or revolved, it'll end up being a poly surface that's essentially already split up for us to use, you know, in a kind of a very convenient manner. So if I were to just draw this thing, right, if I were just to come through here and just draw, and I'm going to just like this, and I were to revolve this, this would all be a single object, and if I applied a material to it, I wouldn't have any opportunities for breaking this thing up and putting detail on it. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm actually going to build this out of individual pieces, and I'm going to start with, you know, like a 3-point arc, and then I'm going to draw a line, and then I'm going to do another 3-point arc like that, and I'm going to draw another line, and I'm not hitting my art dead on, so I'll go back and adjust it a little bit. I'm going to pull this through here and come up like this, and because this is a polyline, each time I click, it's essentially going to make a new surface. So if I explode this, each one of these pieces are individual. So that means when I revolve this thing, each one of these things is going to be a separate surface as part of a poly surface. Does that make sense? So let's go back and adjust, and like, let's hit our art a little bit better. So I'm going to pick these, and I'm going to turn my points on for all of this stuff, and I'm going to just drag select these and move them with gumball. And let's get these guys a little closer. And I'm going to use nudge for this because it's super easy. If you don't have nudge enabled on your machine, let's do that. So let's go Tools, Options. Down here in Modeling Aids, there's a piece, if you open that, called Nudge. And I have it set up to just use the arrow keys. You can have it set up to use Alt and the arrow keys. I have it set up to use arrow keys. And then this is the units. So the nudge key alone, just the arrow key, is going to be this. Control plus nudge is going to be that. And Shift plus nudge is going to be that. So this is arrow key, arrow key, arrow key. Control Shift adds on to that. All right. I find that's especially useful for point editing because it basically just gives you a super easy way to get it exactly kind of where you want it. So that's a little closer to what I was hoping for. Let's go ahead and finish this. Again, this looks like a big arc, so I'm going to do that with another 3-point. There's probably an official name for that. I'm going to shift drag down this way to place the second point, and then I'm going to just pull the middle point up like this. That way I know this point and this point are lined up. And I'm going to just draw this little valley. This comes out here like this. And then we're going to want to get back somewhere to the origin. I'm going to overshoot it because I'm going to trim it off. And I'm going to do the same thing down here. I'm going to draw a center line from 0. That gives me my axis to revolve. And then I'm going to take this entire thing right here and join it. So this is now a polycurve. Now, this actually has a recess in it where this thing sits. I can either draw that now or I can do it, later with a boolean or something like that. I think just because I tend to be a little lazy, which I like to refer to as efficiency, but other people refer to as laziness, I'm going to go ahead and draw the core of this thing in here so that it's available for me when I revolve this. So I'll just take this and trim it. Take this and trim it. And that gives me, once I join it, the body that I'm going to make. Now, I have this piece here, this ring. I might make that with just a cylinder later. So let's just revolve this so that we can feel like we're making some progress. Come up here to the revolve tool. That's our axis. We're going to do a full rotation. So if you look up in the command line, there's different pieces of this word that are underlined. See how under full circle it says U? So if I just type U, enter, I get the hotkey for full circle. All right, and that's basically, our flashlight at this point. Now, there was also a recess down in here where the button is going to land, and so I'll show you a cool trick for using subobject selection and doing stuff like that in order to be able to add that detail later. But let's resolve this thing right here. So let's put a cylinder around this. I'm going to go to the right-hand view, and let's do the outside ring and then the inside ring, and we can always change this. And I'm going to just pull this down like that. And it looks like I way overshot the size on that, so I'm going to scale it down a little bit, shift drag on the handle, and my mouse is dying. It's been misbehaving lately. So I'm going to just tuck it in there kind of like that, and then go to the front view, and it needs to be a little wider. And it looks like on my art this outside ring is a little bit thicker. So I'm going to actually just shift scale the entire thing up and then bring this in like that. And if my inner ring is too big, which it's not bad, if we're calling this a rendering or whatever, it's not a hugely massive big deal. But there's a cool trick that we can do. We can actually shift control click to subobject select part of a polysurface. This is a polysurface, right? And if I click on it, the whole thing lights up. If I shift control click, I can click on this inner surface, and then I can hold down the shift key, click and drag, if my mouse would behave, and I get a subobject selection, which allows me to make this smaller. Now, you'll notice that this rebuilt. That's because what happened is this was a degree 1 surface, and because I scaled this thing, it actually is a little bit narrower than the original one. So this changed from a degree 1 to a degree 3 surface, which rebuilt, which gives you this detail here. I can put this back to the same width, and then all I have to do is shift click, or control shift click, and then I can put that back just using a planar surface if I need to. I don't even really care, because the other surface was fine. There was nothing wrong with it. It was just a little bit more complex. So now you can see that we're actually intersecting this. So if I was to do a boolean, I would know that that would work. And I'm going to just push this a little bit forward, because I want that to have a little bit of space there and a little bit of space there. So this is like a little adjuster ring for focusing it or something like that. I don't know. So let's talk about the back. Now the back, I should have drawn this so that this little detail was already pulled in like that, but I didn't. So I can fix that by coming in here and right-clicking on explode, and I can extract this surface. And then watch this. I'm going to shift drag to scale it in a little bit, and this is going to be my wall thickness. And then I'm going to make a little planar surface between there. I'm going to join this back up, and that seems a little counterintuitive, except I can shift control click, and then this little round dot on the gumball, watch this. I can now just extrude that in and make that little detail. So these gumball superpowers, this ability to be able to subobject select and move things around is really kind of cool, and that's we were getting into that in V5, but it's been refined in V6 to the point where it's much more useful and much more stable. So, all right, so let's start detailing this thing, and we can start. Let's start with the most prominent feature, which is this kind of finger grip thing here. And there's a cool trick that we can play with this using history and intersection. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a ellipse, and I'm going to, man, this mouse is dying. You know you're a computer nerd when you can ruin mice. This is probably my 3rd or 4th mouse in the last year. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this thing out, and I'm going to intersect it in here. And you can see that it kind of does what I need it to do, but I don't really know, right? I don't really know if it's exactly where I want it to be or not, or whether it's the right shape. So how do we figure that out? First of all, make sure that history is on. Make sure that record history is on, and then always record and update children. Make sure those 2 things are on, and make sure that this is highlighted. And let's go down here to the object intersection, and we're going to intersect this with this. And you can see what we get is a curve. Now, if I go back to my artwork, I can see that this curve doesn't match my artwork. It's close back here, but it doesn't really match. So what are we to do? So first of all, let's make this so we can see it. So I'm going to go to my properties, and I'm going to change this. Instead of being the display color by layer, I'm going to change this to red so I can see what happens. Now watch this. If I scale this thing, like say we'll scale it in one direction, when I scale it, my curve updates. So that tells me where the intersection is happening. And it's a little, I overshot it a little bit on this way, so I'm actually going to nudge this thing back a little bit, and I'm going to gumball it just in a little bit, and then I'm going to make it a little fatter. and I'm getting closer to what I want, right? Now, it's kind of not the right shape, so I can even turn on the points for this thing and edit it if I wanted to. And in this case, it's a degree 2 object because it's an ellipse, so it's not going to edit nicely. So I'm going to change its degree. And if you don't know what I'm talking about there, don't worry about it. It's not super crazy important, but I'm going to just change this and make this a little bit more nicely editable object. So now I've got some points that I can mess with, and so I can come in here and I can scale these points in 1D and see how my curve, I can just sneak up on this. And so now I know this is exactly the shape I want, kind of. So this curve is matching my artwork more or less exactly how I wanted it to. And I'm going to pull this back a little bit because it's still a little short. There we go. So we've matched here. We've matched here. I learned this when I was when I did automotive modeling, and it was the way that we made pockets for door handles. They didn't want door handles to be a trimmed surface, and so the pocket behind the door had to be a Class A surface, and so this was the way that you would get the shape of the pocket by using a surface. You'd overbuild two surfaces, intersect them, and then modify the pocket surface so that it matched the shape of the opening that you wanted. And it's kind of a trick that I've kept stealing over the years. Now you'll see that this intersection curve is also, it's getting into this, right? It's getting into this stuff which I don't necessarily want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save everything right now because I haven't saved anything yet. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come in here, right click on this. I'm going to extract the surface. I'm going to change this to copy, and I'm going to copy this surface. And then I'm just going to hide it. Because it's, actually I don't think my copy went through. All right, let's try that again. Have to actually hit the right tool. All right, so that's still connected. Let's go over here, right click, copy yes. That's my copy right here. I'm going to hide this for now. And then I'm going to run my Boolean. And the reason that I'm going to do that is because I'm going to Boolean this. It's going to ruin this surface. I'm going to just remove that surface and then put it back with the one that I just hid. So I know this is in the right spot now, right? Because I've determined that this is making the right type of shape. So let's do our polar array because this needs to array around here. So tool, transform, array, polar. And we'll do this from the right view. And we're going to just go from 0. Let's do, I don't know, let's do 5 of them. See what it looks like. So I think that's probably all right. 5 of them is probably enough. If you want to see what it looks like with say 7, you can just change it up here. And that's probably too much. 6 is, 6 probably. I like 5. Let's do 5. And then right click to accept. And there's all your Boolean objects. So let's go ahead and run that and get the result. So I'm going to Boolean subtract from this using these guys. And if we're living right, this should have worked. I always keep my Booleans. There's an option when you do a Boolean, by the way. Let me undo that and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Everybody's like, what are you talking about? See how up here where it says delete input? If I deleted the input, it would just delete those things. But I don't like that option because I like to be able to mess with this stuff later. So I usually keep that. So I use delete input no, and then that way I just take those pieces and stick them on another layer. And the reason that I do that is because a lot of my clients and stuff are kind of fussy, and so I'll do something and then I'll go, I want those to be like 3% smaller, which means I'd have to go untrim and redo and all this kind of stuff if I didn't keep the stuff that I was originally looking for. So I tend to kind of just keep everything. So let's show that surface that we hid, and then let's take a look and see if it makes sense. right? So if I were to stick this back in here, let's say if I were to just cap this thing, we can simulate what we're looking at. This looks like, now that I'm looking at it, this is going to be a sharp edge. That's going to be a sharp edge, and I don't like that as a design element because this is going to be sharp against your hand, and I don't like that. So I'm going to just delete this, and I'm going to go with kind of what I've got here. But maybe what I'll do is I'll add a little secondary detail that would be interesting through this thing. Maybe it's a ring. Let's try that. Let's see what a ring looks like. And now what I'm doing is I've used Rhino as a modeling tool, right? Now I'm using Rhino as a design tool, and I'm looking at this stuff in 3D, and I'm making my decisions based on what the thing looks like in real life as opposed to looking at my dopey sketch, right? So maybe this has to be bigger. Maybe I want a fatter ring, but I want it smaller. That makes sense. So let's do this. Let's change the construction plane so that we can actually see what's going on. So I'm going to make, what am I going to make the construction plane? Let's make this the construction plane. And then if we wanted to, we could actually move the construction plane so that it's exactly where we wanted it to be. But I'm not super concerned about it being like perfect. I just want it to be, you know, in the same neighborhood. So when I make this thing, it's in the right orientation. So let's make this a little fatter. Maybe this is like a rubber ring or something, I don't know. And that's a little silly. I don't like how that looks. So let's make it a little smaller. I don't hate that. Not super in love with it, but I don't know. Maybe we'll put a pin in that for now and see how it feels as we're going along. So let's take a look at this piece. Now this piece, I want to kind of knock the edges off of this thing. And I'm going to do that just with a simple chamfer. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to just knock these off. And this is obviously way too big, so I'm going to interactively just drag this down until I think it looks about right. And then I'm going to look at this number and say it's, I don't know if you can see this or not, but it's 0.024. I'm going to just set this to 0.02. That way the numbers make sense. And then let's preview it, see if we like it. That'll work. So I'm going to right click to accept. I've decided I don't like this. I'm going to just let that go through there like that, because this actually could be a cool little material thing. This could be brushed, this could be anodized, this could be knurled. We could do some stuff like that. So I'm going to get rid of that. Make an executive decision. Now this has these little focus rings on here, these little focus pieces. I'm going to just make those with cubes, and I'm going to just stick it somewhere like this. And then let's go to the top view, and like that, and then I'm going to center it. Are you guys using snappy dragging with gumball, by the way? If you come down to your gumball options, are you using snappy dragging or smooth dragging? If you use smooth dragging, I think is the default. Snappy dragging is an option, and what snappy dragging does is it allows your gumball to respond to O-snaps. So if I wanted to snap this right to here or right to the center, I can do that. Look at that. You didn't pay anything for this. You're already getting stuff. It's like knowledge, but for free. All right, let's do a polar array around here. Transform array, polar. I'm going to use the center of this object as the center of the polar array. And I'm going to do maybe, I don't know, let's do like 15 of these and see what we get. Now it's in the wrong plane, so let's fix that. I'm going to hide just these two objects. Or actually, I'm going to show just these two objects. I'm going to hide everything else. I'm going to use the isolate command and watch this. boop, everything goes away except that. So let's polar array this again, now that we can see it. Transform array polar 0, and let's do 15. That's probably all right. We could maybe do 17. Maybe 22. Yeah, that'll work. Now here's the cool thing. Keep in mind, this is we did this with history on. This is our original piece. Okay, this is the parent object. All the rest of these are children. Watch this. He said, hoping this works. If I go in here and I chamfer this object using a very small chamfer, set all 0.1, set all 0.01, that's better. Maybe I can go even smaller. There we go, set all 0.005, and I right click it. If I'm living right, history should update all these. Boop, and it did. So now I can make little design choices. If I don't like that, I can undo it and say if I don't like that to be a chamfer, and I want to change that to a fillet, and I change this to a very small fillet. Now it fillets all of them. History superpowers. All right, let's grab all of this and boolean it together. And it did boolean. Booleans work much nicer in V6. All right, so we've got our little focus ring. How are we doing? Everything else is good. So we've got that, we've got our focus ring. This is good. Now this thing, if I'm looking at the sketch, it has like a little, almost like a little pattern detail in here where the handle like has these sections on it that are milled out. And that's actually kind of a tough little thing to do, believe it or not. So let's sort through that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw this. I'm going to start from here. I'm going to draw this. And I'm actually going to project this onto the model. The world's noisiest garbage cans are coming by my house. I apologize for that. Or garbage trucks. So I've projected this on, and I get this curve, right? Now, if I go to the top view, and I decide this is kind of where that needs to be, and I project this on, I'm kind of using a couple of different views to build what is eventually going to be my trim curve. So I've got this curve and this curve. I'm going to isolate those. And so if I take these and I trim them so that they, let's go to the top view, are all trimmed together, I've got the curve that's going to make up my panel. So let's take this and join it. And then I can take this and polar array it from the right-hand view. And I'm going to do that 4 times. And that gives me the curves I need in order to be able to split this thing up. All right, so now I need to work on this particular surface. So I'm actually going to extract it for now. I'm going to not copy it. And I'm going to take these curves, isolate everything else. Actually, I'm going to hide this stuff too. And then I'm going to take this object, and instead of trimming it or trying to do anything crazy with it, I'm just going to split it. So I'm going to split using these 4 curves. And what that should do is it should give me these panels. Now, there's a couple of ways that we can do this. The cheaty way is to take this, take all of these, go to the right-hand view, and shift drag scale them to whatever you want. And what that's going to do is that's going to pull those all in just a little bit. It's also going to suck them in a little bit. Got to look at them in a couple of views. So they got a little shorter, a little farther in, but also notice that they overlap here, which we don't want. So I'm going to take this side, I'm going to scale in 1 degree from here. Like I said, this is the cheaty way of doing it. It's not super crazy accurate, but it'll work. And then I'm going to take these and I'm going to just mirror them across the center line using the mirror command. So now what I can do is I can simply go through here and loft this stuff, or use curve, 2, 3, 4 curves or whatever I want. Doesn't matter. However you feel best attaching this stuff. Now, the other thing to notice is, see, if I look at this from the front view, I have the same problem. See how these are dipping under that a little bit, and that's not necessarily what I want. So let's fix that. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to scale it in 1 degree straight up a little bit. And that fixes that problem. Okay. Now, cool thing about this, since this is symmetrical, if this is the panel that I like, join it, go to the right view, transform polar array. It should drop it in there so that all that joins up. And we can check it by using show edges, which lives down here. And so we've only got 2 open edges on either side. The pink is the open edges. So if we bring this back, join it back up, close poly surface, which is what we want. All right, how are we doing so far? Everybody still with me? Are we learning things? By the way, I forgot to mention, these are supposed to be interactive sessions. So if you have questions or anything along the way, please hit the chat and let me know, and I'll stop and answer them. I want to make sure that this isn't the Watch Kyle model show. This is the Let's All Learn How to Model Together show. So if there's something in there that you want to see, feel free to hit the chat and I'll make sure and address it. All right, let's do the button on the end. I'm going to save. And the button on the end has this little recess in here. It also has these little doodads around the outside of that surface, so we'll add those too. But let's get this first, and I'm going to just simply wire cut that. That's going to be easy. So I'm going to just draw a circle that matches. I'm going to run the wire cut command, and I'm going to just run that right through there. And what it does is it just takes that wire and it rolls it right through there. Like I said, I keep my boolean objects, so I manually delete it later. So let's pull some gumball superpowers and make our button on the end of this thing. So watch this. I'm going to shift control click. I'm going to start dragging and tap alt, and it makes a copy of that surface. And so then, and I way over dragged it just for illustration purposes. I'm going to use snappy dragging, and I'm going to stick it back to where it came from, somewhere in here like this. And actually, let's go to the front view and wireframe. I'm going to stick this down in here like this. Maybe I'll overshoot it a little bit, shift drag for scale, and then I'm going to start dragging this thing out, holding down the control key when I drag, and that gets me a little button. No modeling tools other than Gumball. We just did all that with Gumball. All right, I want to round the edge of this thing off, so I'm going to just do that with a simple fillet. Actually, I might do it with a blend instead. Fillet on the left button, blend on the right. I like blend because it uses continuity as opposed to a circular fillet. It gives a little bit different shape. So there's our button. Cool thing is we also have a separate surface here that we can use for a little texture blip. So I might actually add a little secondary detail on this thing by shift control clicking, and then I'm going to just extrude that in just a little bit by using Gumball. And it gives me a little a little opportunity for a texture break. And this is probably going to be a soft object right here. So maybe what we want to do is just knock the edges off this just a tiny bit. Something like that. A little bit less. Don't want to intersect our fillets together. So that's a little softer looking, but still gives us this opportunity for a material break. And these things are sharp, these flashlights. It's like, you know, every time I was taught when I was in school, and you know, anything that was like a handheld object, you always like knock the edges and stuff off so that it's not sharp. But these tactical flashlights are like supposed to be like really sharp and pointy. So I'm gonna just use that to my advantage and not knock all the edges of this thing off and leave it very, very hostile looking. It's a very angry flashlight going to the trash. Ha! Scares the hell out of the squirrels and the raccoons. All right. So I just imagine, like, you know, like walking through the park or something, and somebody comes up to mug you and you pull out a flashlight. Back up, I've got a flashlight. I don't know. Am I the only one that thinks these products are hilarious? I don't know. Anyways, they're fun to model, but I think their usefulness is pretty silly, actually. Oh my goodness. All right, so let's build these little crown details on here, and these are a little bit wider and a little bit shallower. So I'm going to just draw a circle like this, and like that, and I'm going to make a little object out of this. I'm just going to pull it out using Gumball. And the thing about Gumball, the way it works, right? If I have a curve and I extrude the curve, I get a surface that's open. If I have a surface and I extrude that, I get an object that's closed, right? The curve extrudes into surfaces, surfaces extrude into solids. So that's a little pro tip there, or at least a tip from me. I don't know if you can call me a pro or not, but let's make this a little bit smaller. I'm going to cap it because I want to use it as a Boolean object. Go to the left-hand view so we can see what we're doing. And I'm going to polar array this just so that I can use it as a Boolean object. How many should we do? Maybe 5? 4 is too few, so let's do 5. And notice that these are intersecting. See that right there? That's fine, except it may cause a little problem when we Boolean this. So I'm actually going to take this, because this is the parent object and we did it with history. I'm going to scale it in just a little bit. See this little piece right there? I want that. I don't want it to intersect in this corner. So now, because the Boolean objects themselves are intersecting, I may need to actually do this in pieces. Let's try it first and see. I think it may fail, it may not. If it doesn't, it didn't, great. If it did fail, then what we would have to do is go back and do each one individually. Now, this is a fairly flat thing, and if we're really doing a tactical flashlight, it's going to be something really serious. Maybe what we want to do is, maybe we want to sharpen these just a little bit by making them a little bit more hostile so that we really scare the crap out of the raccoon when we go to the trash. So now this has like a little knifier edge on it. Oh my goodness. What has happened? What's happened to us? Flashlights used to just be for light. All right. I'll keep my social commentary to myself. Oh, inside I'm cracking up laughing. All right, so let's do, I'm going to keep breaking this down. See how it like whacked off my entire thing? I don't want that, so let's keep going down until I want to have a facet on here, but I don't want it to, like, you know, super like overdo it. So that'll work, something like that. All right, so we're just about done with this thing. We need to add a little bit more detail on this surface. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to extract and isolate. And then let's go ahead and build the pieces for that. And we're almost done. We're 45 minutes in. You guys are probably bored watching this by now, so we'll skip to the end here pretty quickly. Let's add this little detail. I'm just going to use gumball with snappy dragging to center it. Something like this. Go to the right-hand view. I'm going to just make sure that it pokes all the way into this object because we're going to use it as a boolean. And we are going to array polar. And how many do we want to do? Let's do like 22 and see what that looks like. That's probably plenty. Again, this is the parent object on the top, so whatever we do to it, it's going to translate through. And I'm going to just match this to what we had before, which was a very small fillet on this thing. And you'll see that history then propagates that through the rest of the part. We can bring it back, join this all back up so it's a closed poly surface again, and then do the boolean. We could have probably pulled off the boolean using it just surface, but it's always a better idea to do it on a closed object. All right, so we're pretty close here. We've got this secondary little thing in here. I don't know what that is. It makes it extra hostile for scaring raccoons. And then we've got a clip to make, so we're getting there. This piece, I'm gonna lie, cheat, and steal and make this piece out of a piece that we already have. So watch this. I'm gonna extract this surface using copy, and I'm going to steal all of this stuff. I'm gonna join it, and I'm gonna bring it out a little bit. I'm gonna scale it a little bit, and use that for that little secondary detail. And just tuck it in there just a little bit like that. So once it fits inside of there, and we know that that looks all dandy, then maybe we should rotate it just a little bit so it's a little bit more interesting, like that. And then let's hide everything else, and let's turn this into an object itself. So I'm gonna Shift-Control-Click on this. Again, no modeling tools, we're just using gumball. I snappy dragged it so that it matched down here, and then we'll just simply build a little planar object and join it. And then that is in there. Now it's a little short, you can see that, so let's fix that. Shift-Control-Click, I'm just gonna drag it and make it longer. And that didn't work, so what do we have to do? Let's get rid of this. And let's Shift-Control-Click on both of these, and let's see, can we drag these? Nope. All right, so then what we're gonna do is we will, and the reason that failed, I believe, is because this object is trimmed in with this. So let's just take these two pieces and let's just extrude them. We'll just add another surface onto the end of that. Doesn't hurt anything. Join it up, cap, and we're getting, now we're talking. So now this intersects with this, and then these always have some crazy light bulb array in them, so let's go ahead and build that thing. And let's do that. I'm going to use this object as the thing that we're going to build off of, so let's go to the right view, and then I can see that this is my inside seam, so I know I have to stay inside of that. So let's build, I don't know, some crazy thing that looks like it's got a million candle power. Like that. I'm going to go back to my center line and trim that. I'm going to just revolve this. I like typing the commands because I'm lazy, but the revolve command lives down here. I used it when I first started using when I first started using Rhino. I was like, man, they make you type commands. Are you serious? And I find that it's actually really fast. So I just type them because I have most of the commands memorized. All right, so that's too small, so let's scale it up. See how we're using this as a design tool now instead of just a modeling tool? You can see that it intersects there. See how it pushes through, so I'm going to back off just a bit. And then let's do, let's put our LEDs in here. This thing's got to have like 30 LEDs on it, right? So let's put our LEDs in here. And we'll just deal with whatever consequences come from this. And let's pull it down like that. Push it in like that. And then let's, I don't know, let's make this, it's got a ton of them. So let's transform array polar. I didn't know this was going to be a polar array clinic, but so there's that. And then let's take, and I'm going to drag, tap Alt, make a new one. Maybe I'll stick it right in the center and make this one gigantic. Something like this. And I'm going to stick all of these together. Now I'm just making stuff up. And then I want this to look like it's like inset into there. So I'm actually going to isolate this. Looks like the Michelin Man. Cut that off. Cap. Shift Control click. And I'm going to extrude this out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this thing and use it as a boolean object from this using that. And then that way it looks like that thing is all lensy. And then these usually have like a secondary lens over them or something like that. So let's add that in. Oh, my SolidWorks background downloader is completed. Everybody's like, he uses SolidWorks? Not very often. Truth be told, my daughter's going to engineering school and she was using SolidWorks. So, all right, scale this flat. And I'm going to just tuck this in here like this. And we're going to call that pretty much done. So I can take this thing and let's actually construct that lens so it renders nicely. So I'm going to use this as a trimming object. And I'm going to trim this off back here. And it left those little pieces, which is fine. I'm going to just delete them. And then I'm going to take this piece and join it up. And then that'll be a nice little lens. If I had to, I could add some thickness to that using like a solid offset or something like that, but I'm not going to worry about it. All right, so let's, come on, voice. My voice is failing, sorry. So let's add a little chamfer to this thing. That's too much. It's one of the things I like about the previews. You can actually just play with it and get it the way you want it to go. And then it probably is asking for just a little bit more detail in here. So let's throw some of that little greebly, kitbashy, nerdy stuff in there to make it look a little more interesting. In fact, we might even do something cool like this. Let's do this. Let's make a secondary little detail in here out of this thing. Like that. And maybe even rotate it a little bit. Whoa, not in that direction. Let's do this direction. There we go. Let me do something like this. That might be nuts, but let's try. And the detailing part of these type of projects are the fun one. You know, it's the fun stuff. You can add this kind of junk forever. All right, so let's transform, array, polar, center. Let's do like 30 of these. Make it really detail-y. It went the opposite direction of what I was thinking, so because I think I picked the wrong object. So hang on. I wanted those to boolean in, not out. Let's do this. Okay, so what's going on here? Anybody have any idea? Something is flipped inside out, and we can tell if we use the dir command. See how the arrows are pointing in? If I flip this, because this is an open object, that's what's causing the boolean to go backwards. Now if I run it, it goes in the right direction. Okay? Now I'm going to need to separate these pieces because it joined these all together when I did the boolean. So I'm going to just we can subobject select that. That's fine. We'll do that later. And then the last thing I might want to do is just make this a solid object by capping it. That way it's closed. And the reason that I do this, I like to kind of model in chunks where everything is closed. So that way if I come down here and I say select open poly surface, which lives down here, anything that lights up, I'll know if it can't, you know, if it's an open poly surface or it's an open surface, anything that I see, I'll know, okay, I can't send that to a printer, right? That can't go to a 3D printer. Everything else is fine. Let's make the clip really quick, and then we will start getting into some detailing and doing some printing or some rendering. How's everybody doing for time? Everybody still with me? I'm going to just offset this curve. It's too much. Gives me that. Go to the top view. I'm going to just extrude this in 2 directions. Extrude planar curve. B enter goes in both directions. And then just to make this a little bit more interesting from this view, I'm going to isolate. I'm going to give this thing a little bit of shape. Something like that. I'm going to mirror this across the center line. Here's my little cheat for wire cut. If you take the 2 curves and connect them, then you can wire cut with a single curve instead of having to do 2 wire cuts. Let's see. Helps if these curves are planar, so I'm going to just take this and scale it to 0. And then try that again. And let's see, the direction it's saying in the Y, I don't want that. I want it to be C-plane normal. And it didn't do it. So that means it's either not intersecting somewhere or something is misbehaving. So let's try bringing it just a hair in from the edges and try it again. And if that doesn't work, we will, there we go, that worked. So now we've got the little shape for our clip. And then I'm going to add just, because this is a tactical flashlight, I'm going to add some little detail things like this. And, oop, my dog's going to go nuts, sorry. Somebody's at my door, so she's going to go crazy. do something. Let's take this. Let's make this the same height as this. I'm going to just snap that there. And I don't like that. Let's do something different. This is, this is what I really like about Rhino, is it's really, it's not just a modeling tool. It really is a design tool. You can really sit down, and the speed at which you can model things is really, is really fantastic, and you can really get to a result very quickly. So like I can flatten this out, and we can take this up here. And you can experiment and iterate and play with stuff that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do in another modeling program because of the restrictions that they would place on you as far as datum planes and numeric this, and everything has to be blah blah and fantastic. Whereas here we can just kind of sail. So this is kind of a hot mess, so let's turn the points on for all of this stuff, and let's do a little bit of cleanup here. So I'm going to select all of these points, and I'm going to scale them to 0, and that way I know they at least all line up. And then I'm going to move this guy over a little bit. Move this guy over a little, whoops, move this guy over a little bit. And let's line all these guys up too. And this thing has an angle in it, so I'm going to use the gumball to match that. And I'm going to mirror this. And then, because Wirecut only lets you do one wire at a time, I'm going to extrude these into objects, cap them, and then do a boolean subtract. And then we get our clip. Add a couple of little screws to this, and we will be done with the modeling part. And the rendering part's going to go really quick. So let's make a little, we'll make a little hex head screw. Cap, boolean, something like that. I'm going to just knock these off. That way they sit on the surface instead of going into the surface. And that's our thing. So where are we at? 10:03. Ooh, nailed it. All right. Still interested in seeing some rendering stuff? All right, so let's look at that. So let's go to our layer stack. Let's hide the image because we don't need it anymore. And then let's throw this thing into rendered mode, which is basically this. If we go to the materials tab, again, if you don't have the materials tab, bring it up. Let's make some materials. So I'm going to make a, we're going to do this with a paint material, and I'm going to make this thing black. And just to get rolling, let's just blacken most everything. So you can see that we've got that. This is going to be like a plastic object. Let's make that red. And then this is going to be a metal object of some sort. I'm going to make it a little rougher. And then these, let's make these different. metal object. And let's make these a different color. And let's make them a little rougher. So there's that. Now we can get into some fun stuff. I'm going to make this a paint object, but I'm going to make it silver. Something like that, maybe a little darker. This I'm going to make a metal object. Make it a little something like that. And this is going to be a glass object. And let's make its color a little darker. And let's make it not quite as clear. Make sure that's assigned. All right, so we can then start doing stuff like this. We can start doing sub-object selection things like we can do these guys. And I'm Control-Shift clicking, by the way. And we can do things like this to make that look like that's machined. Same thing with this stuff. Our very scary squirrel scaring end. And that makes it look like it's kind of like, you know, those pieces have been machined out. Maybe we do the same thing with this. That could be interesting. But we can play with it. You know, it's like it's non-destructive because we're not pulling the model apart. We can do this stuff and mess with it and decide whether we like it or not. Something like that. Now let's look at some cool features in the rendering stuff. Like if we make a new paint object, or a new plastic object, by the way. Down here at the bottom, you'll see that there's an opportunity for a bump texture. Let's make this black. So I can grab this piece right here, and if I want that to have a little knurled texture on it, I can come down here and add a crosshatch to it, extra small, and you'll see that this now has this crosshatch texture on it. And if I want to make it even smaller, I can do that. Maybe. And it's not super visible, right? We want to make that a little bit more visible. So what we have to do is we have to change this from a plastic back to a custom. Then we go down to the bump section down here, and let's bump this up to like 40. Now it's visible. And if we like that, we can just Shift-Control-Click, assign it to there, and now that has texture. Shift-Control-Click, assign it to here. Now that has texture. See how we can start playing with this stuff? This can be more. I can make this 60. Now it's starting to really show. Maybe we do it to this piece. So now I can start playing with like materials and finishes and start saying, okay, well, where does this thing need some additional interest or detail? And start doing things like that. I can duplicate this, make it red, Control-Shift-Click, assign it to here, and now that has a detail on it as well. Or I can change this back to a plastic, I'm going to lose my material, I can come down here and I can use a different bump. That one is too large. If it's not enough, I convert it back to a custom, and I come here and I bump this up here. Now it's very obvious. And see how with just like a completely non-destructive workflow, we can come through here and do stuff that is really pretty interesting. I'm going to hide this, and I'm going to make a plastic material that is fairly transparent and a little bit darker. And I'm going to assign it to these guys. And the cool thing about this is this does not affect my ability to be able to print this model. This thing is still closed poly surface, which is really cool, right? I like that a lot. So I'm going to do the same. I'm going to assign the same thing here. I think that glass is a little bit too much. All right, and then if we wanted to put a logo on it, we could put a picture frame on it or something like that. The only problem that I will tell you about, because we have sub-object selections made on here, if I add a decal to this, the decals don't show up. So what I would actually have to do is to put the decal on an object that doesn't have sub-object selection on it, or remove the sub-object selection, make it a different surface, and go from there. All right, I think that's a bug that they're still working on, but. So if I wanted to put a decal or something on here, because this object has different material sub-object selected on it, when I put the decal on, the decal is either going to remove the sub-object selection, which is what it used to do, or it's just not going to show up. So, all right, so now that we have this thing kind of laid out like this, we can just simply go right-click, ray trace mode. It's going to think for a second, and then it's going to go through and actually ray trace this thing. And you can see, because we're broadcasting and stuff, the speed on this is not stellar, but you can see that it's actually going through and ray tracing and getting really nice shadows. Now, the cool thing about ray trace mode is this is actually a working mode, so I can actually pick objects in this scene and still do things to it. I can change material definitions and stuff like that. This knurling is a little heavy now. Maybe I want to back that off just a little bit. And it'll just recalculate. Maybe I want to back this off just a little bit. That seems a little aggressive, even for a tactical flashlight. And then it'll do its thing. I don't like the material, now that I'm looking at this, I don't like the material on this piece, so I'm just going to Control-Shift-Click and put it back to the original paint object. So you can actually in real time go through and decide what you want to do with this. And if you decide that this texture is too much, you can knock it down a little. And if it needs to be smaller, we're going to click on it here, and we can change the size. And now it becomes a much smaller texture. See how nice this is? Look at this little spectral bleed right here from the red onto the aluminum. That's how you know you're getting a ray trace instead of something else. So we could let that run. When we're done, we would just take a screen capture of this. We can roll it around to the front, do another view. We can mess with our camera. Instead of doing a 50mm lens. Come on. We can do 35 to get a little bit more perspective. Make this thing look a little bit more impressive. We can also do things like focal blur, which is really kind of cool. If I go to the focal blur and I do manual focus and I snap from here to here, And then I always get this backwards when I change the settings. Let's see, it's still thinking. Try this again. I gotta get a little processor bandwidth here in order to be able to get into the settings. Oh, you're not gonna let me do it? That's why we save. It's still going. It's just not going the way I want it to. Let's bump out of this for a second. Let's do our focal distance here. And let's try those settings. And I think this aperture setting is what's crazy. So let's do this at like 64. Let's see what that does. I always think I have these settings dialed, and then I don't. All right, that's clearly not what I wanted. All right, focal distance. Let's try this guy. Did it get it? No. All right. Let's try this. I'll get it at some point. Nope. All right. I clearly have my settings. I'm not thinking of those settings correctly, so I'll figure those out and quit torturing you on my own. But anyways, what I was trying to show you was that the focal blur is something that you can set in the scene, and then you can actually see that in real time as you rotate around. So I'll get that straightened out for the next time. All right, but at least you got your money's worth. So what else can we show you? Anything else you want to see? Any questions on anything so far? Nope. All right, excellent. Well, I tell you what, I think that's about all I have for you today. We're at 10:17 right now, so I think we've gone over just a little bit, but I think for the most part, except for my focal blur snafu, I think we were pretty pain-free. Come back again next month when we do more of these. We'll figure out something else fun to build and go from there. So if there's anything else I can do for you, hit the chat window, let me know. If not, we'll shut down and let you be on your way with your day. Nope. Okay, fantastic. Thank you for coming. We'll shut down for the day, and we'll get this video posted on Vimeo, by the way. Just so you know, we have a Vimeo page that a lot of people don't know about. It's called Rhino Tutorials, and it is this one. There's the link, and there is 1,616 videos, and as of this afternoon, there'll be 1,617, because I'll put this one up here because that's where it'll live. But this is where all the old ones are. So if you want to see the pen one, you want to see the getting started fidget spinner, all this kind of stuff, it's here. And this is all, most of it's free. There are some on-demand things in here, like the level 1 and level 2 classes and stuff like that are not free, but most of the videos are free, and tons and tons and tons of learning in here. All right, so make sure that you bookmark that, come back and visit it often, and we will catch up with you for the next Getting Started. Thanks, everybody. Bye.